Hello, and here we are once again on Tea Time this afternoon, and we have esteemed company. We have Neale Walsch here. Welcome to Tea Time, Neale.
Thank you, it's lovely to be here.
And you're the author of over 28 books on practical spirituality, the latest of which I believe is this one called The Only Thing That Matters. Now, I've just been reading this and I thank you from the bottom of it.
I'm very glad that you've benefited from it. It's a lovely thing for an author to feel that someone has received benefit from the work they do. So thank you for sharing that with me. It's wonderful to know that.
And that you begin this book by stating that humanity's basic instinct is not survival.
No, it's not. And I always thought it was, of course. We're told that, we're taught that in school. You know, the fundamental instinct, the basic instinct of humanity is survival. But I've come to understand that the basic instinct of humanity is divinity, the impulse to express divinity. If the basic instinct of humanity was survival, we would never run into the burning building to save the child on the third floor. But when we walk past the burning building and we hear the child and the mother calling out, "Please save my baby," we run into the building, not away from it. If the impulse was survival, we would never do that. But the impulse is to do that which is divine, and divinity always honors life and does what is life-preserving in every instance. So we run into the burning building, we step in front of the bullet that we know is going to be fired, we cross the railroad tracks to save the person who's stuck there, we risk our lives intuitively. It's not something we think about. We don't think, gee, I wonder if I should run into that building. I don't know. See, we don't think about it because the first impulse is to preserve life, not to preserve our own life, but to preserve life as it exists, intrinsically, intuitively on the planet. So I've come to understand that the fundamental instinct of humanity is the expression of humans' true nature, which is divinity itself. And I didn't know that until I began writing this book. I want to share with you something interesting about this book.
Yes, please do.
I generally get a title first before I have any idea what the book is going to say. That was true of a book I wrote called When Everything Changes, Change Everything. I had no idea what that book was going to say. And that was true of this book, The Only Thing That Matters. I thought, gosh, you know, I had an opening thought, and only the opening thought, which was that 98% of the world's people are spending 98% of their time on things that don't matter. And my lovely wife said to me, well, that's probably true, but what is it that does matter? And I said, I don't know. And she said, I mean, not specifically. I knew broadly that my spiritual journey was what mattered, but I didn't know specifically. And my wife said, don't you think you should write a book about that? And I said, okay. And so I sat down to write this book, and the book emerged through me, as have all the books I've written, without my knowing in advance a thing about what they were going to tell me. So in the writing of this book came the sentence, the fundamental instinct, the basic instinct of humanity is not survival. The basic instinct of humanity is divinity. And then that example that I just gave you was given to me. Out of the clear blue, my mind just said to me, if survival were the basic instinct, you would never run into the burning building to save the child. You'd run away. And I thought, how true. That's exactly true. But it's not something I thought of in the specific sense. The entire book emerged in exactly that way.
So it is getting back to it all being a conversation, which is how you began writing?
Yes,
right?
Yes. All of life is a conversation with God. I believe that that which is divine is communicating with all of us all the time. And all we have to do is take a moment and stop and listen. What I have done is I've made a practice of it. It's really a spiritual practice. So that every morning between 4:30 and 5:30 or 6, I'm up and aware and awake and alive and sitting in my writing room, if you please. And I'm waiting to hear what the muse, if you will, or what God is wanting to share with me and to say to me that morning. And I put those thoughts and those ideas into books like this, which is why, as it happens, I've been blessed to write 28 books, because it turns out God never stops talking.
Yeah, quite, exactly. What it's fostering is that innate relationship with yourself, isn't it? That is the
Yes. Yes, it is fostering that. It is allowing me and all those who are touched by this experience to know that, one, we are never alone. Two, the opportunity exists eternally and in a dramatic way, eternally and dramatically, to connect with the highest source of love and wisdom, peace and understanding, clarity in the universe that I call God. And so as long as I know that, as long as I'm clear and I've had a direct experience of it, it's not something that I know, Clara, in a sense conceptually. It's not a concept. It's something that I know experientially. That is, I've experienced it. Once you experience the presence of God in your life in the way that I have, you never feel alone again. You never feel without resources. You never feel without answers. You never feel without insight or wisdom or clarity. You feel companioned on the path of life, and that's a very good feeling.
So was this a choice you made, or was it something that came to you, you just noticed? I mean, how did this happen for you?
It wasn't a choice I made in the sense of deciding, you know what, I'm going to have a conversation with God. It was more of a spontaneous immersion. It was an experience that emerged in my life quite spontaneously as a result of desperation. You know, I was in a time in my life when nothing was going well. My career was going downhill. My health was going downhill. My relationships were falling apart all around me, and frankly, nothing was working in my life. And I was 50 years old, and I can recall sitting by myself in a darkened room, asking myself, how is it that I've gotten to the age of 50, half a century on the planet, and it's all I can do to barely survive, much less make a real success of things. I'm just kind of like hanging on. And I remember asking God in my heart, in my mind, tell me the rules. Just tell me the rules. I'll play. I promise I'll play. Just give me the rule book. And after you give me the rules, don't change them. Because I had the experience that some of the rules I'd been given as a child were not in fact the rules.
Isn't that true?
Or they had been changed along the way, one way or the other. So I just wanted to have some idea of what is the path, what is it that I don't understand here, the understanding of which would change everything. So it wasn't really that I set out to have that conversation, but it simply emerged out of my deep yearning. I was crying out in the middle of the night. It was literally the middle of the night, 4:30 in the morning. I had gotten up one night in the middle of that night, crying out to God, please, help me here, because I don't understand any of it. And I heard the voice of God speak to me as clearly as I hear your voice today, simply saying to me, and it was an audible voice. It wasn't an imaginative voice. It was over my right shoulder, an audible voice that simply said, "Do you really want answers to all of these questions, or are you just venting?" And I can recall my response was, "I am venting, but I sure would love to have the answers if you could give them to me." And so I took out, I happened to have a yellow legal pad on the coffee table. I had managed to hobble out to the living room from the bedroom, and just sitting there in my frustration in the dark of the night, trying to figure it all out. And there was that yellow legal pad, so I started writing out my questions. Okay. And every time I wrote a question, I got an answer. So I began to write what I was hearing. Excuse me.
And was this the time before you were typing into computers and things? Was it all longhand?
It was all longhand.
Yeah.
It was
There's
long.
something about the flow through the pen or pencil.
Yes, it was very tactile. It was very, physical, and it was very immediate. Even though it's slower than typing, but far more immediate in the sense of being connected to my body more directly. And there's nothing quite like seeing your own handwriting on a piece of paper. Interestingly enough, they've stopped teaching cursive writing in school now. In the United States, there's a big discussion on whether it makes sense to teach cursive writing. They want to just have kids just print, just learn how to print. You don't have to learn how to do cursive.
Oh, because that's how you fill in forms.
Not only fill in forms, but everything is on the computer is done in regular standard block letters. And so, but the result of that is we now have 3 and 6 and 10 and 12 and 15-year-olds who cannot read cursive writing.
Yeah, I guess
They
so.
read a letter handwritten and don't know what it says. So we are seeing, in many ways, the dumbing down of human society. That's another whole topic.
I was going to say,
Another whole
easy
program.
now.
Another whole program on tea time.
So you are here in Bournemouth at the moment
Yes.
for Jackie Deakin's event, to be twilight, and you've got a masterclass happening on Thursday, haven't you?
Yes.
What are you going to be sharing with people there?
Well, I hope to be sharing with people what I have come to understand about those rules we talked about life and how it works, and what we can do each individually as well as collectively to change and improve our lives on an individual level, as well as to alter the collective experience of humanity. I hope to be able to share with people some of the extraordinary understandings I've come to about life and how it works and how it can work for them.
Indeed, thank you. So it is that key point about having an experience that will teach, isn't it? You can read about it, and I must say I think your books are an experience, because you pretty much hand it over to the reader. Say, without giving too much away here, that this conversation with yourself is real. This life that you're leading is real, and you talk about the mind and the soul and that dynamic that's going on between the mind and the soul a lot. And I actually wondered about the difference between the soul and the spirit. Is there a difference? Do you discern a difference between the soul and the spirit?
In my vernacular, in the way I use the words, there's a difference. I'm not sure that organically there's a difference, but the way I use the verbiage, to me, the soul is the individuation of God, and the spirit is the essence of the totality of God. So it feels to me then that when I use the word spirit, I'm speaking of, in the ecclesiastical sense, the Holy Spirit.
Right.
That is the essential energy that God is. And the soul seems to me to be the individuation or the singularization of the singularity that is called God itself. So I think the soul is God in us. And, or I could put it, to use both words in one sentence, I think the soul is the spirit of God in us.
Bravo, we like that, don't we? That's super. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this dilemma we have as humans having this experience here, well, as spiritual beings having a human experience here, is that we've got our logical mind to deal with. So we're on the soul pathway, the soul trying to guide us, and we keep getting pulled off by what the mind wants to do. So, I mean, reading this book really helps, by the way. Also talking to Neale here too. Do you think this is one of the real problems that we have at the moment, is to be able to follow our truth of our soul rather than our logical mind?
Well, I think it's the essential challenge of humanity, because the mind is a very limited resource, whereas the soul is unlimited. The soul's knowledge is infinite, and the mind's knowledge is finite, quite finite, I might add. It's okay, it's the purpose of the mind. I meant to say the mind's knowledge.
Yes.
The mind's knowledge is finite, and it's quite okay, because the purpose of the mind is to ensure our survival. So that's where we get the idea that survival is the basic instinct.
Okay.
That's where the original idea comes from. Because the mind thinks, you see, that we can somehow not survive, whereas the soul understands that life is forever, that life is eternal and never ends. Merely the way it is expressed is what changes. But life itself never ends for any soul. So that the soul always was, is now, and always will be, forever and ever, and even forevermore. The mind, however, doesn't know that. That is, it doesn't have that as a part of its factual basis of understanding, because the mind only holds the data to which it has been exposed in a particular incarnation or in a particular lifetime. And that data has come to us from all manner of sources. From our parents initially, our guardians, those who brought us up and so forth, from the stories they've told us, the books that we have read, the books that they have read, that they shared with us, the stories we see later on in movies and television, and God help us, video games and all the rest. And so our minds are filled with this data that we assume to be largely true. Even fictional data we understand is based at some level on something that's true about life, or it wouldn't make good fiction. So we imagine that we have a mind full of understandings, facts, and essential knowledge about the universe. But our minds don't know the half of it. So the trick is, the essential challenge is, just as you've stated, to really escape the limitations of the mind and to somehow find an avenue to connect with the unlimited wisdom of the human soul. It is quite possible to do that, and mystics have been doing it from the beginning of time. So the recordings of humanity's history are replete with examples of human beings who have escaped the temporary limitations of the mind and found themselves able to access the insights of the human soul and then bring that information into their mental awareness and into their physical experience, into their day-to-day behaviors.
But do you think that is why meditation and mindfulness is really taking off big time now?
It's precisely why that's happening, because people understand that in order to really find deep insight and peace, serenity, and awareness, they must literally be out of their mind.
Yeah.
Say, what, are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
Actually, yes.
Yes, please.
Now, that doesn't mean that we abandon the mind. Really, in a sense, it means we refocus the mind. We allow the mind to be refocused onto what really matters. That's why the book is called The Only Thing That Matters, because it's about what really matters, which is the journey of the soul, not the journey of the mind.
Excuse me. Cough break. So this consciousness wave, this consciousness awareness that seems to be happening around the world big time at the moment, is really being very much helped by the meditation that we're all being encouraged to do, and all this scientific data that's being collected on putting monks into MRI scans. Have you heard about that?
Yes, of course.
And they've been finding out that different sorts of meditation affect the mind in different ways.
But you see, meditation is really quite simple. It doesn't have to be complicated or super sophisticated or incredibly complex. I often encourage people to do what I call a 60-second meditation, broken down into 6 10-second bites. I invite people to meditate 6 times a day for 10 seconds at a time, quite spontaneously, maybe even in the middle of a sentence. I tell them, in the middle of some activity, just if you do that 6 times a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, at the end of a year, your life will change. It's quite that simple. It's just about stop. Can we just stop? Just for a moment. For 10 seconds. 6 times a day. 1 minute a day to paradise is what I call that process. So it's all very lovely. It's all very lovely to sit in meditation, with a candle and the music and whatever, and oming or whatever you do. And I'm not making fun of it, because those things are effective. It's all very lovely to do that, but it's not really required. All the mind asks us is, could I have just a brief respite? And in that 10 seconds of silence, if you do it consistently, I was almost going to say religiously, which would have been a bad choice of words, but if you do it consistently, 6 times a day, 7 days a week, you'll find after even just a couple of weeks that your soul will say, these are my 10 seconds. And it'll start sneaking in there and bringing you insights, even in that little 10-second period, that you hadn't realized were there.
That's marvellous. So that's a real handy tip for us, isn't it? A 10-second meditation.
6 times a day.
6 times a day.
1 minute a day to paradise.
Because heaven is here on earth, isn't it?
Yes, precisely. But we have to be willing to do it. And also, by the way, I don't like it when it's pre-programmed, because when it's pre-programmed, then the mind says, now it's my time to be quiet. My alarm just went off. It's my time to be quiet. Rather, it should be train yourself to do it quite unexpectedly when you're not prepared for it.
It's lovely.
In the middle of a television program, which you'd never really want to do, you should just and you get back to yourself. You just get back to yourself. It's the most amazing device I've ever discovered.
That's brilliant. I also like how you're bringing the fun out of the profundity.
I try. God says, who do you suppose invented humor? And so that's what I live by as well.
So if you'd like to know more about Neale Donald Walsch, he's on neildonaldwalsch.com, and of course books all over Amazon, Hay House and all sorts, and you have your Conversations with God portal.
Yes, the fastest way really to stay connected with the Conversations with God message is to go to cwgconnect.com, www.cwgconnect.com. It gets you right into a daily connection with me. I'm there every single day of my life, chatting back and forth with people all over the world. And it's a wonderful platform that allows people to stay connected with the energy of those books that have, God bless them, changed the world.
Yeah, and you're helping us to all change our relationship with ourselves. So thank you so much.
Oh gosh, you're very kind. Thank you for saying that.
Walsch for being part of Tea Time.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for inviting me. You're very gracious.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thanks to Jackie Deakin as well.